Hello and welcome. In this video segment we'll create the geometry for Tutorial 1, Exercise 1. The drawing for this exercise is at the end of Tutorial 1 in your MIL tutorial text. On the screen is the completed geometry. Shortly I'll create a new file and start at the beginning. But before we do that, let's review the finished geometry on the screen. The center of this grid is x0, y0. Now the first step will be to create the rectangle that measures 7 inches by 5 inches, and I'll use Create Rectangle for this. The next step will be to create the rectangle that measures 6 by 4 inches and has 2 0.5 fillet radii on the right hand side. I'll use Create Rectangular Shapes for this, and yet another rectangle which measures 2 inches by 1.5 inches, and it also has 0.5 fillet radii on the right hand side. After we have the initial geometry created, I'll use Trim and Delete to clean things up. Let's get going and start a new part and start creating the geometry for this exercise. I'm going to move up to the top left hand corner of the screen and pick on the icon for New Part. The first thing that we're going to do is create the rectangle that measures 7 by 5. I'm going to move up into Create and then pick Create Rectangle. Now up on the ribbon bar I'm going to click in the white space for width and input 7.0 and then hit the Tab button on my keyboard. And now we've moved over to the height. Now the height of this rectangle is 5, so I'm going to input 5.0. Now sliding over to the right, Anchor to Center. I'm going to click on this icon so the anchor point is at the center point of this rectangle. Now the center point of the rectangle needs to be at x0, y0. What I can do is click right here because I have a visual cue that I'm going to snap to the origin. Another way of doing this would be to move on up, click on the fast point icon and input 0, 0 and then hit enter. And there's our rectangle. I'm going to move up to the ribbon bar and click on OK. Now the next rectangle we're going to create is 6 by 4 and it has 0.5 fillet radii on the right hand corner. So I'm going to go into Create and this time I'm going to pick Create Rectangular Shapes. Now I'm just going to move this dialog box over to the left hand side and I'm going to click on the double arrows to expand this dialog box. Now starting at the top we've got the radio button activated for base point. We're not using 2 points. Moving on down below I'm going to click in the white space for width and it's 6.0. Now just below us the height, I'm going to click in the white space for height and this rectangle has a height of 4 inches. Now just below fillet radius I'm going to input 0.5 and then hit enter. Now moving on down to the bottom of this dialog box in the anchor section, what I'm going to do is turn the radio button to turn the anchor position to the center of this rectangle. Now moving over to the graphic screen you can see I'm prompted select position of base point. Well, we want the center of this rectangle to be at our origin x0, y0. So what I'm going to do is move on up, open up this drop down, and what I can do is pick origin. And there's our rectangle. Now going back to the rectangular shape options dialog box, I'm going to click on the green check mark for OK. Now as you can see we've got 0.5 fillet rads on the right hand side, but on the left hand side we'll delete these two later on. Now we've got one last rectangle to input over on the left hand side. So what I'm going to do is go back into Create Rectangular Shapes again. Now this last rectangle, the width is 2, so I'm going to click in the white space for width and input 2.0. Just down below for the height, I'm going to click in the white space, and this rectangle has a height of 1.5. Now the fillet radius is 0.5, so that's going to stay as is. But moving on down to the bottom in the anchor position, what I'm going to do is select this anchor position on the left hand side. I'm going to now move over to the screen, select position of base point. What I need to do is just move this dialog box over to the right. Now as I move my cursor down, you can see now I have a visual cue that I'm going to snap to the midpoint of this left vertical line, which is exactly what I want. So I'm just going to pick this point. There's my rectangle. Now back over to the rectangular shape options dialog box. I'm going to click on the OK right at the bottom. So there's the rectangle. Now what we need to do is do some deleting, and then followed by our deletion of some of these entities, I'm going to move into trim. So moving up to the top of the screen, I'm going to hit the icon for delete entities. Now when prompted, select entities. I'm going to select this arc, this one needs to be deleted, and right down the bottom I'm going to get rid of this one as well. Now one last thing, I'm going to delete this vertical line on that last rectangle that we created. Now I'm done. I'm going to move over and click on End Selection. Now our next operation is to do some trimming. So I'm going to move up into Edit and select Trim Break, Trim Break. Now let's check out the ribbon bar. This first icon is Trim One Entity. As we slide over to the right, Trim 2, Trim 3 entities. This button takes us into Divide, and the last one over here, Trim to Point. So what I'm going to do is click on Trim 2 Entities. Now you can see this prompt, select the entity to trim extend. I'm going to pick this horizontal line. Now the prompt has changed slightly. Select the entity to trim extend to. I'm going to pick this vertical line on the left. Now moving on down below, for the next prompt, select the entity to trim extend. I'm going to select this horizontal line, and then for that next prompt, extend to, I'm going to pick this line. Now we're still in trim to entities. Now if I pick this line and then move over to the left and pick this line, well, part of the line that we want has disappeared. So what I'm going to do is move on up and do an undo, and instead of trim two entities, I'm going to slide over to the left and select trim one entity. Now here's the prompt, select the entity to trim extend. I'm going to pick this horizontal line, extend to, I'm going to move over to the left and pick this left vertical line. Looks good. Moving on down below, I'm going to pick this horizontal line and then extend to, I'm going to move over to the left and pick this vertical line. What we need to do now is trim this line between this horizontal and this horizontal line. What I'm going to do is move up to the ribbon bar and select Divide. The prompt, select the curve to divide. Well, I'm going to pick this left vertical line, and as you can see, it's trimmed it to this line and this line. Looks great. Back up to the ribbon bar, we're done here. I'm going to hit the green check for OK, and there's our completed geometry. This concludes this video. Thanks for watching.